Thexvol adjusted his observation equipment and watched the latest arrivals with mild interest. The humans had finally come to join the Great Convergence War. Their ships looked small and old compared to the mighty vessels of the Velnari fleet or the sleek fighters of the Zephyrian Empire. 50 human ships against over 200 from the other species. It was almost sad to watch. The orbital station buzzed with activity as military leaders from across the galaxy gathered to discuss strategy. Thexvol had been assigned to observe and report on all new species entering the war. His job was to measure their strengths, weaknesses, and potential value to the Galactic Confederation. So far, the humans seemed like they would be a short report. "They use kinetic weapons," muttered Commander Vexitar, a large Carthan warrior with 4 arms and scars across his chitinous face. "Metal bullets instead of energy beams. How primitive can you get?" Thexvol made notes on his datapad. The Carthan was right. Human weapons fired solid projectiles instead of the plasma bolts or laser beams that civilized species used. Their ships had thick metal armor instead of energy shields. Everything about them screamed backward technology. The briefing room doors opened with a soft hiss. 2 humans entered, walking with steady steps that seemed too quiet for their size. The male was tall with dark hair and calm eyes. He wore a simple uniform with no decorations except a small name tag that read Hyunwoo. The female was shorter, but carried herself like someone used to being listened to. Her name tag said, So Young. Commander Hyunwoo, representing the human. "Defense Fleet," the male said with a slight bow. "This is Strategic Advisor So Young. We are ready to serve alongside our new allies." General Korthvan of the Velnari Empire looked down at the humans from his elevated platform. His purple skin gleamed under the lights, and his 3 eyes studied the newcomers with obvious disappointment. "Your fleet composition is modest. 50 ships to join a war involving thousands?" "We brought what we could spare," Hyunwoo replied, "but we are eager to help however possible." So Young stepped forward slightly. "We would appreciate access to tactical data on enemy forces, combat patterns, preferred strategies, psychological profiles if available." Several alien commanders exchanged glances. Thexvol noticed the look of amusement on their faces. Why would such a primitive species need detailed enemy information? Most civilized races could adapt their superior technology to any threat. "We can provide basic threat assessments," General Korthvan said, "though I doubt your kinetic weapons will be effective against Krillian armor." "We will adapt," So Young said simply. The briefing continued with updates from various fronts. The Krillian horde was pushing deeper into Confederation space. Their warriors were savage fighters who lived only for battle. They had already destroyed 3 colonies and were moving toward more populated systems. When assignments were given out, the humans received the least important positions: guard duty on supply convoys, patrol routes in safe sectors. Nobody expected much from the species with the old ships and metal bullets. Thexvol followed the humans back to their section of the station. He wanted to observe them more closely before writing his initial report. The human quarters were simple and clean, no fancy decorations or displays of wealth, just functional spaces where practical people lived and worked. He found a good observation point and activated his recording equipment. The humans moved efficiently through their daily routines. They exercised regularly, maintaining physical fitness that seemed excessive for a space-based military. They practiced combat drills with their primitive weapons, showing coordination that was impressive if pointless. "Excuse me," a voice said behind him. Thexvol turned to see the human called Jin-Ho. He was younger than the commanders but carried himself with confidence. His uniform showed he led something called Ghost Company. "I am Thexvol, military observer," he said. "I study different species for the Confederation." Jin-Ho smiled. "Ah, you are watching us. What do you think so far?" "Your people seem dedicated," Thexvol said carefully, "though your technology appears limited." "Limited?" Jin-Ho looked genuinely curious. "In what way?" "Your weapons fire metal projectiles. Your ships use physical armor. Most civilized species moved beyond such primitive methods centuries ago. Jinho nodded thoughtfully. I see. Yes, we do things differently. But different does not always mean worse, does it? Before Thexavol could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red as the communication system crackled to life. All military personnel to battle stations. Krillian raiders have attacked supply Convoy 7 Alpha. Repeat. Convoy 7 Alpha is under attack. The humans moved with sudden speed that surprised Thexavol. Within minutes, their ships were launching from the station. He watched through the observation deck as the small human fleet moved toward the battle zone. The convoy was only 20 minutes away by jump drive. When the rescue force arrived, they found chaos. Krillian raiders had destroyed 2 freighters and were boarding a third. The convoy's Zephyrian escort was fighting bravely, but taking heavy damage. Thexavol watched the battle through long-range sensors. The Krillian ships were fast and deadly. Their warriors fought with berserker fury that made them dangerous opponents. The Zephyrians were skilled pilots, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Then the human ships arrived. Instead of the careful, long-range engagement that most species preferred, the humans did something unexpected. They accelerated directly toward the enemy ships. Their kinetic weapons opened fire at close range, sending streams of metal projectiles into Krillian hulls. "What are they doing?" gasped Commander Vextar, who had joined Thexavol at the observation deck. "They are getting too close. The Krillians will tear them apart in close combat." But something strange happened. The Krillian ships, built for ramming and boarding actions, struggled against the human tactics. The metal bullets punched through their armor in ways that energy weapons could not. When Krillian warriors tried to board human ships, they found defenders who seemed just as willing to fight hand-to-hand. In 30 minutes, the battle was over. The Krillian raiders were destroyed or driven off. The surviving convoy ships were safe, and the humans had lost only 1 vessel while destroying 5 enemy craft. "How?" whispered Commander Vextar. "How did they do that?" Thexavol was asking himself the same question. He had recorded everything, but the data made little sense. The humans had won through superior coordination and tactics that seemed designed specifically for fighting Krillians. But how could they know Krillian weaknesses so well? When the human ships returned to the station, Thexavol was waiting in the docking bay. Commander Hyun-woo emerged from his vessel looking calm despite the recent battle. There was no sign of the excitement or stress that most species showed after combat. "Commander," Thexavol called out, "that was an impressive victory. Your tactics were very effective against the Krillians." Hyun-woo paused and looked at him. "Thank you. We studied the enemy before engaging. Information is as important as weapons." "But your people have never fought Krillians before today." "No," Hyun-woo agreed. "But we have fought others like them, savage warriors who rely on fear and fury. There are ways to handle such opponents." So Young appeared beside her commander. "The Krillians are not the first berserker species we have encountered. Their psychology follows predictable patterns." "Predictable? How?" Thexavol asked. "They expect their enemies to fear them," So Young explained. "When we do not show fear, when we get close instead of running away, they become confused. Confusion leads to mistakes." Thexavol thought about this as he returned to his quarters. The humans had won their first battle through understanding their enemy rather than superior technology. That was unusual. Most species relied on their advanced weapons and defensive systems. The humans seemed to rely on something else entirely. He began reviewing the battle recordings in detail. The human movements were precise and coordinated. They worked together like parts of a single organism. When one ship was damaged, others immediately moved to protect it. When an opportunity appeared, they all struck at once. But there was something else. In the recordings, he could see human crew members through the transparent sections of their ships. During the fiercest moments of battle, they looked focused, but not afraid. Some even seemed to be smiling. Who smiled during mortal combat? Over the following days, Thexavol continued his observations. The humans requested assignment to more dangerous missions. While other species preferred safe patrol routes, the humans asked for convoy duty in contested space. They volunteered for reconnaissance missions in enemy territory. They seem eager to fight, he noted in his reports. Almost as if they enjoyed dangerous situations. General Korthvan read Thexvol's preliminary assessment with interest. So they are brave but foolish? That could be useful. Brave fools make good cannon fodder. I am not certain they are foolish, sir, Thexvol replied carefully. Their victory against the Krillian raiders suggests they understand combat better than their technology would indicate. One small victory means little, the general said dismissively. Wait until they face real opposition. Then we will see what humans are truly worth. Thexvol was not so sure. Something about the humans bothered him. They were too calm, too confide. The Krillian horde arrived like a storm of death and fury. Thexvol watched from the human command ship as enemy vessels poured out of jump space in waves. Thousands upon thousands of dark ships filled with warriors who lived only to fight and kill. The sight made his 3 hearts beat faster with fear. Contact! Shouted the human communications officer called Yunji. Her voice was steady, despite the overwhelming force bearing down on them. Enemy count is still counting. Estimate 100,000 individual fighters plus capital ships. Commander Hyunwoo studied the tactical display without emotion. Acknowledged. Signal all units to prepare for engagement. Remember the plan. Thexvol wondered what plan could possibly work against such odds. The northern perimeter had only 3,000 human soldiers spread across 50 ships. They faced an enemy force more than 30 times their size. Mathematics made the outcome certain. The first attacks came from long range. Krillian energy weapons reached out across space like fingers of death. The human ships moved in strange patterns, weaving between the beams with coordination that seemed impossible. Their primitive kinetic weapons began firing back, sending streams of metal bullets toward the enemy formation. Why are they not retreating? Thexvol asked So-young, who was coordinating defensive positions. Because our job is to hold this line, she replied simply. Other positions depend on us buying them time. On the other fronts, the battle was not going well. Thexvol monitored communications from across the defense network. Velnari forces on the eastern perimeter had already fallen back twice. Cypherian squadrons were reporting heavy casualties. Carthan warriors, famous for their courage, were calling for reinforcements. But on the northern perimeter, the humans held their ground. The Krillian assault intensified. Wave after wave of fighters swept toward the human positions. The enemy came in formations that had broken larger fleets before. They screamed their war cries across open communication channels, trying to spread fear among their opponents. The humans did not seem impressed. Minjun, how are things at Firebase Echo? Hyunwoo asked over the command channel. Getting interesting, sir, came the reply from the planet's surface. They are sending everything they have at us. We are ready for them. Thexvol switched his observations to the surface battle. Firebase Echo was a small outpost that controlled sensor arrays for the northern perimeter. It was defended by 200 human soldiers against several thousand Krillian warriors. The base should have fallen in minutes. Instead, something extraordinary was happening. The Krillians attacked in their traditional style. Massive charges of screaming warriors with energy weapons and vibroblades. They expected their enemies to break and run when faced with such overwhelming fury. Most species did exactly that. The humans did not run. They had prepared defensive positions that forced the Krillians to attack uphill through narrow passages. Their kinetic weapons created fields of death that no charge could cross. When Krillian warriors got close enough for hand-to-hand combat, the humans met them with equal savagery. Look at that, whispered Yunji, pointing at one of the surface monitors. Thexvol watched in amazement as a young human soldier named Dong-Yun fought 3 Krillian warriors at once. He had been wounded in the arm and leg, injuries that would disable most species. But he kept fighting with a fury that matched his enemies. When his rifle ran out of ammunition, he drew a metal blade and continued the battle. Is he insane? Thexvol asked. No, So-young said quietly. He is protecting his squad mates. Humans fight harder when defending others. The battle raged for hours. Krillian forces threw themselves against human positions again and again. Each attack was repelled, but the cost was terrible. Human casualties mounted steadily. Equipment broke down under constant use. Ammunition supplies ran low, but they did not retreat. "Sir," Minjun reported from Firebase Echo, "we are down to 60% strength. Request permission to fall back to secondary positions." "Negative," Hyunwoo replied. "Hold your ground. Reinforcements are coming." Thexval checked the tactical display. There were no reinforcements available. Every other perimeter was fighting for survival. The humans were alone. "Why did you lie to them?" he asked Hyunwoo. The human commander looked at him with calm eyes. "I did not lie. Reinforcements are coming, just not the kind you might expect." Before Thexval could ask what he meant, alarms sounded throughout the fleet. Long-range sensors showed new Krillian formations approaching. Not fighters this time, but massive capital ships with crews in the thousands. The kind of vessels that could destroy entire fleets. "This is it," Yunji announced. "They are bringing everything they have." The human fleet spread out to meet the new threat. 50 small ships against 20 Krillian dreadnoughts. The outcome was no longer just certain. It was mathematically impossible for the humans to survive. That was when Thexval learned his first real lesson about human warfare. The human ships did not try to fight the dreadnoughts from a distance. Instead, they accelerated directly toward the massive enemy vessels. Their kinetic weapons opened fire at close range, targeting specific systems with precision that seemed impossible. "What are they doing?" Thexval gasped. "They will be destroyed." "Watch," So Young said softly. The first human ship to reach the Krillian line was commanded by someone called Wu Jin. His vessel was tiny compared to the enemy dreadnought, but he flew it like an extension of his own body. Instead of attacking the heavily armored hull, he targeted the weapon ports and engine vents. Metal bullets poured into critical systems. The dreadnought's main guns fell silent as their control systems were destroyed. Secondary explosions rippled through the massive ship as damaged components overloaded. Other human ships followed the same pattern. They swarmed around the Krillian capitals like insects attacking giants. Their small size made them hard to hit with large weapons. Their speed let them strike and move before the enemy could respond. Within an hour, 3 Krillian dreadnoughts were dead in space. The others began to withdraw, unwilling to face such unprecedented tactics. "How?" Thexval asked in amazement. "How did they know exactly where to hit?" "We studied Krillian ship designs for months," So Young explained. "Every weakness, every vulnerable system. Knowledge is more powerful than big guns. But the space battle was only part of the story. On the planet's surface, something even more remarkable was happening at Firebase Echo. The Krillian ground assault had overwhelmed the human defenders. The base had fallen, and most of the garrison was dead or wounded. Any rational species would have considered the position lost. The survivors would retreat to fight another day. Humans were not rational. Instead of retreating, the surviving soldiers went underground. They disappeared into the maintenance tunnels and storage areas beneath the base. Within hours, strange reports began coming from Krillian forces. "Their equipment keeps breaking," Minjun reported over a hidden communication channel. "Power systems fail randomly. Weapons malfunction. They think the base is haunted." "Excellent," Hyunwoo replied. "Continue ghost protocols. Make them afraid of shadows." Thexval realized what was happening. The humans had not lost Firebase Echo. They had simply changed the rules of engagement. Instead of defending fixed positions, they had become invisible, predators hunting their enemies. Krillian warriors were brave when facing opponents they could see and fight, but humans had turned the battle into something else entirely. They attacked from darkness and disappeared before the enemy could respond. They sabotaged equipment and vanished like spirits. The Krillians began to fear their own shadows. "This is not normal warfare," Thexval observed. "Normal warfare is for normal species," So Young replied. "We are not normal." As the days passed, the northern perimeter held against impossible odds. Other sectors fell back or collapsed entirely. Velnari forces retreated to the inner system. Zephyrian fleets regrouped behind planetary shields. Carthan warriors abandoned their forward positions, but the humans remained. They fought with injuries that would kill other species. They used tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. They turned impossible situations into unlikely victories through sheer determination and clever thinking. Why do they not retreat? General Korthvan demanded during a command conference. They have done their duty. No one expects them to hold against such overwhelming force. Because retreating is not in their nature, Thexval found himself saying. They fight differently than we do. Different how? They do not fight to win battles, Thexval realized as he spoke. They fight to complete missions, and their mission is to hold the northern perimeter. The breakthrough came on the third day. Krillian forces, frustrated by their inability to break human resistance, made a critical mistake. They concentrated everything they had for one massive assault. Every ship, every warrior, every weapon focused on destroying the stubborn humans once and for all. It was exactly what the humans had been waiting for. All units, Hyunwoo announced calmly. Execute Maneuver 7. Thexval watched in fascination as the human fleet suddenly changed formation. Instead of defending fixed positions, they began moving in complex patterns that drew the Krillian forces deeper into the system. The enemy, focused on destroying the elusive humans, followed eagerly. Too late the Krillians realized they had been led into a 3 weeks after the victory at Zerion Prime, Thexval found himself reassigned to a new mission. His superiors wanted detailed reports on human combat methods. The northern perimeter defense had shaken everyone's understanding of what the new species could do. Now they needed to know more. Your job is to document everything, General Korthvan had told him. How they fight, how they think, how they win impossible battles. The High Command needs to understand these humans. Thexval was given access to human military operations across 3 star systems. What he saw changed his understanding of warfare forever. The humans had not been idle after their victory. Instead of resting or celebrating, they had immediately spread out to other battle zones. Small groups of human soldiers were now fighting alongside alien forces on dozens of worlds. And everywhere they went, impossible things began happening. His first stop was the Taldor system, where Carthan forces had been struggling against Krillian raiders for months. The 4-armed warriors were skilled fighters, but they preferred direct confrontation. The Krillians had learned to avoid such battles, instead using hit-and-run tactics that frustrated the proud Carthan military. When 50 human soldiers arrived to assist, the Carthan commanders were not impressed. What could such a small force accomplish that thousands of Carthan warriors could not? The answer came in the form of a human called Tai-Ho, who volunteered for something he called a death squad mission. I need 5 volunteers, he announced to the human troops. This is a one-way trip. We will not be coming back. Thexval watched in amazement as every human soldier stepped forward. Tai-Ho selected 4 others and began preparing for their mission. They were going to infiltrate a Krillian supply base deep in enemy territory. Their goal was not to capture or hold the base, but to destroy it completely. This is madness, muttered Commander Zakthor, the Carthan leader. 5 soldiers cannot succeed where entire battalions have failed. Watch, said a human advisor named Yujin. She was a specialist in what humans called psychological warfare. Her job was to understand enemy thinking and find ways to exploit it. The death squad left that night in a single small ship. Thexval tracked their progress through long-range sensors. They approached the Krillian base using stealth techniques that seemed impossible. Instead of attacking the heavily defended main facilities, they targeted something unexpected: the base's water treatment plant. Why water? Thexval asked Yujin as they monitored the mission. Krillians need pure water for their breeding cycles, she explained. Without it, they become aggressive toward each other instead of their enemies. We learned this by studying their biology and social patterns. The human team did not destroy the water plant. Instead, they contaminated it with harmless chemicals that made the water taste terrible to Krillian senses. Within hours, The base was in chaos as warriors began fighting among themselves over the remaining clean water supplies. That was when Tejo's team struck the real targets. While the Krillians were distracted by internal conflict, the humans destroyed ammunition depots, communication centers, and transportation hubs. By morning, the entire base was useless. All 5 humans died in the final assault, but their sacrifice had eliminated a major enemy stronghold. More importantly, they had demonstrated a new type of warfare that other species began to copy. They study their enemies like scientists, Thexval noted in his reports. They find weaknesses that no one else notices, then exploit them with surgical precision. His next observation post was in the Kepler system, where a mixed fleet of alien ships was trying to break a Krillian blockade. The enemy had positioned their forces perfectly, using asteroid fields and gravity wells to create an impenetrable defensive line. When human ships arrived, their commander was a young woman named He-Jin. She spent 3 days studying the enemy positions and talking with commanders from other species. She asked detailed questions about each race's combat preferences, their fears, their strengths and weaknesses. "What is she doing?" asked Admiral Kexmal, a Zephyrian fleet commander known for his tactical brilliance. "Learning," replied a human called Sang-Ho, who captained one of their heavy cruisers. "Humans work better when we understand our allies as well as our enemies." The attack, when it came, was unlike anything Thexval had ever seen. Instead of a traditional fleet engagement, Hyejin coordinated each species according to their natural abilities. Zephyrian ships, fast and maneuverable, were used for reconnaissance and harassment. Carthan vessels, heavily armored and powerful, became mobile fortresses that drew enemy fire. Velnari forces, with their precise weapons and disciplined crews, provided long-range support. The humans acted as coordinators and troubleshooters. When Zephyrian ships got in trouble, human vessels appeared to cover their retreat. When Carthan forces needed support, human squadrons provided exactly the right assistance at exactly the right moment. How does she know what each fleet needs before they ask for it? Admiral Kexmal wondered aloud. "She studies," Sang-Ho replied simply. Commander Hyejin speaks 14 different languages and has read the military histories of every species in the fleet. She understands how each race thinks and fights. The blockade was broken in 6 hours with minimal casualties. But Thexval noticed something else. After the battle, representatives from different species were talking to each other more than before. The humans had not just coordinated the attack, they had helped different races understand each other better. They are not just warriors, he realized. They are diplomats and teachers too. His most shocking observation came in the Vega system, where human forces were dealing with a problem that had frustrated every other species. A group of Krillian survivors had taken hostages on a civilian transport ship. They demanded safe passage to enemy territory in exchange for the lives of 300 alien passengers. Standard procedure was to agree to their demands and try to rescue the hostages later. Civilian lives were always the priority in such situations. The humans had a different approach. "We are going to board that ship," announced a human called Kyung-min, who led a unit called Marine Force Alpha. "Impossible," replied Captain Velsara, the Velnari officer in charge of the rescue operation. "The ship has 50 Krillian warriors aboard. Any boarding action would result in massive civilian casualties." "Not if we do it right," Kyung-min said calmly. The human plan was insane by any rational measure. They would approach the transport ship in small stealth pods, cut through the hull in multiple locations simultaneously, and overwhelm the Krillians before they could harm the hostages. "The timing must be perfect," Kyung-min explained to his troops. "We have exactly 30 seconds from first breach to complete victory. Any longer and civilians die." Thexval watched through remote sensors as the human Marines executed their impossible plan. 20 stealth pods attached to the transport ship at precisely calculated locations. Cutting torches opened holes in the hull. Smoke grenades filled the corridors with thick clouds that confused the Krillians but did not affect human equipment. The Marines moved through the ship like ghosts, using their knowledge of Krillian psychology to predict exactly where the enemy would be. They struck with precision that seemed impossible in such chaotic conditions. 28 minutes after the boarding began, all 50 Krillians were dead and every civilian was safe. How? Captain Velsera asked in amazement. Practice, replied a human marine named Bo Young, who had led one of the assault teams. We train for situations like this every day. We study every type of ship layout, every possible hostage scenario, every way things can go wrong. But you have never been in this exact situation before. No, Bo Young agreed. But we have been in hundreds of similar situations. Experience teaches patterns. Patterns teach solutions. As Thexval compiled his reports, he began to understand what made humans different from other species. They did not rely on superior technology or overwhelming force. Instead, they used their minds to find advantages that others missed. But there was something else. Something that took him longer to recognize. Humans fought harder when they were protecting others. He first noticed this during a battle in the Tau Ceti system. Human forces were defending an evacuation convoy carrying refugees from 3 different species. When Krillian attackers broke through the outer defenses, the human response was swift and brutal. Ships that had been methodical and careful suddenly became aggressive beyond all reason. Crews that had followed orders precisely began taking initiative that bordered on recklessness. Individual humans performed acts of heroism that defied logical explanation. Why are they fighting so much harder now? Thexval asked Commander Hyunwoo, who was coordinating the convoy defense. Because now it matters more, the human replied. Before we were fighting for territory or strategic advantage. Now we are fighting for people who cannot fight for themselves. Thexval watched human soldiers risk their lives again and again to save alien refugees they had never met. They formed protective bonds with other species that seemed to strengthen their combat effectiveness. The more they cared about their allies, the more dangerous they became to their enemies. This is not logical, he muttered to himself. Logic is useful, said a human medic named Ji-hoon who was treating wounded refugees nearby. But logic has... The alert came at dawn. Ship time. Thexval was reviewing his latest reports when every alarm on the station began screaming at once. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red as announcements echoed through the halls. All military personnel, to battle stations. Krillian main fleet detected moving toward Velnari Prime. Repeat. Enemy main fleet approaching Velnari homeworld. Thexval felt his 3 hearts skip beats. Velnari Prime was the heart of the Empire, home to 12 billion civilians and the seat of galactic government. If it fell, the entire war effort would collapse. He rushed to the command center where chaos ruled. Tactical displays showed the approaching enemy force in all its terrible glory. 2,000 Krillian ships advancing in perfect formation. Every vessel bristled with weapons designed to destroy planets and fleets alike. Status report, demanded General Korthvan, his purple skin pale with shock. Enemy force consists of 48 dreadnoughts, 300 battleships, and over 1,500 support vessels, reported the intelligence officer. Estimated arrival at Velnari Prime in 18 hours. What defensive forces can we assemble? Combined fleet of 800 ships from various species. Half are already engaging enemy advanced scouts. Projected casualties are severe. Thexval watched the numbers on the tactical display. Even with every available ship, the defenders were outnumbered more than 2 to 1, and the Krillians had been winning every major engagement for months. This was not just a battle, it was the end of everything. What about the humans? Someone asked. General Korthvan looked around the room. They have 100 ships in the area, useful for support roles but hardly enough to change the outcome. That was when Commander Hyunwoo stepped forward. The human had been standing, quietly in the corner, listening to the reports with his usual calm expression. Request permission to speak, General. Granted. Though I fail to see how your small force can help in this situation. Hyunwoo studied the tactical display for a long moment. Our fleet alone cannot stop this attack, but we have been preparing for something like this. Preparing how? We would like to show you what humans are really capable of when we stop holding back. The silence that followed was complete. Every alien officer in the room stared at the human commander. Holding back? What did that mean? Explain, General Korthvan ordered. For months, we have been learning how your species fight, what technologies you use, what strategies work in this galaxy, Hyunwoo said calmly. We have been modest about our own capabilities while we gathered information. So Young appeared beside her commander, carrying a data pad filled with technical specifications. We would like to contribute more substantially to this battle. But first we need to reveal some technologies we have kept hidden. Thexval felt a chill run through his body. Hidden technologies? What had the humans been concealing? The answer came an hour later when the human fleet began its approach to Velnari Prime. Thexval watched through long-range sensors as human ships suddenly began moving faster than should have been possible. Their engines, which had seemed primitive, compared to galactic standards, revealed capabilities that made them equal to the most advanced drives in known space. How? Gasped the sensor operator. Those ships are maintaining acceleration rates that should tear them apart. Inertial dampening technology, So Young explained. We have been using reduced power settings to avoid attracting attention. But that was just the beginning. As human ships took their positions in the defensive formation, they began revealing weapon systems that had been completely hidden. Turrets emerged from concealed compartments, shield generators powered up to levels that registered on instruments across the system. Point defense systems activated with precision that made automated targeting look crude. They have been hiding advanced technology behind primitive appearances, Thexval realized. But why? Because we needed to understand this galaxy before we showed our true capabilities, Commander Hyunwoo replied. Knowledge is more valuable than weapons. We have spent months learning how to fight alongside you, how to coordinate with your technologies, how to think like your enemies. Admiral Sang-ho's voice crackled over the communication system from his flagship. All human vessels, this is Fleet Command. Authorization granted for full combat protocols. Repeat. Authorization granted for full combat protocols. Thexval watched, in fascination as the human fleet transformed before his eyes. Ships that had looked small and outdated suddenly revealed their true nature. They were not primitive vessels crewed by backward aliens. They were precision instruments of war operated by a species that understood violence better than anyone had imagined. The Krillian fleet arrived exactly on schedule. 2,000 ships emerged from jump space in a formation designed to overwhelm any defense through sheer mass and firepower. They had crushed every fleet that stood against them using these same tactics. They had never fought humans at full capacity. Human fleet, you are ordered to take defensive positions behind the main battle line, General Korthvan commanded. Your ships are too valuable to risk in direct engagement. Negative, General, Sang-ho replied calmly. We are moving to forward. Positions. It is time to end this war. Before anyone could respond, the human fleet accelerated past the defensive formations. 100 ships moving toward 2,000 enemy vessels. It looked like suicide. What are they doing? General Korthvan demanded. Something no one else has tried. Thexval said quietly, watching the tactical display with growing amazement. The humans did not attack the Krillian fleet directly. Instead, they performed a maneuver that seemed impossible. Their ships dove toward Velnari Prime's star, using its gravity well to achieve speeds that should have been lethal. At the last possible moment, they altered course and emerged from the star's corona, like demons rising from fire. The Krillian fleet, positioned to defend against attacks from normal space, found themselves facing enemies attacking from the direction of the sun itself. Their sensors, designed to track conventional threats, were blinded by stellar radiation. Their formation, perfect for traditional warfare, became a liability when attacked from an unexpected direction. Human ships emerged from the solar assault with weapons charged by stellar energy collectors that had been hidden until this moment. They struck at Krillian capital ships with precision that seemed supernatural. Instead of trying to destroy the massive vessels through overwhelming firepower, they targeted specific systems with surgical accuracy. Command and control centers, So Young announced, watching the battle unfold. Communication arrays, navigation systems, tactical computers. Destroy the brain and the body becomes helpless. Thexval watched Krillian dreadnoughts drift helplessly as their crews lost contact with Fleet Command. Battleships collided with each other as their navigation systems failed. Entire squadrons fired on their own forces when communication breakdowns caused identification errors. But the humans were not finished. All vessels, Sang-Ho announced, execute Pattern Omega. Show them what we learned from their own tactics. What happened next shocked every observer in the system. The human fleet suddenly began fighting like Krillians. Not with the berserker fury that marked enemy forces, but with the coordinated aggression that made the Horde so dangerous. They had studied Krillian tactics, improved them, and turned them against their creators. Human ships swarmed around enemy capital vessels like angry insects. They used ramming attacks that their reinforced hulls could survive, while enemy ships could not. They boarded enemy vessels in action so swift and violent that resistance collapsed within minutes. They are out-Krillianing the Krillians, Thexval whispered in amazement. On the planet's surface, another battle was raging. Krillian ground forces had been deployed to key population centers, threatening civilians to force the defenders to surrender. It was a tactic that had worked on other worlds where civilized species chose surrender over genocide. Humans responded differently. Marine Force Alpha deploying to civilian protection zones, announced Kyung-min from his assault transport. Rules of engagement. Protect the innocent at all costs. Thexval switched his observations to the ground battle and witnessed something that would haunt his dreams for years to come. Human soldiers fighting with a fury that made Krillian berserkers look calm by comparison. But this was not mindless rage. It was focused, controlled violence directed with surgical precision. When Krillian warriors threatened civilians, human marines appeared from nowhere and struck with overwhelming force. When enemy forces tried to use hostages as shields, human soldiers found ways to neutralize the threat without harming innocents. They moved through urban combat zones like they had been born for such warfare. How are they so effective in close combat? Thexval asked So Young, who was coordinating ground operations from orbit. Because we are protecting others, she replied simply. Humans fight differently when innocent lives are at stake. We become more than we normally are. The space battle raged for 6 hours. When it ended, the Krillian main fleet was destroyed or scattered. 2,000 enemy ships had been reduced to floating debris and helpless hulks. The human fleet, though battered, remained intact and operational. More importantly, Velnari Prime was safe. In the aftermath, as rescue operations began and damage, 6 months had passed since the Battle of Velnari Prime. Thexval stood in the Great Assembly Hall of the Galactic Confederation, watching representatives from hundreds of species gather for the most important vote in galactic history. The question before them was simple but profound. What role should humans play in the post-war galaxy? The war was indeed over. The Krillian Horde had surrendered 3 weeks after their devastating defeat at Velnari Prime. Their remaining forces, scattered and demoralized, had laid down their weapons rather than face human-led coalition forces. For the first time in decades, the galaxy was at peace. But it was a peace that raised uncomfortable questions. The humans have proven themselves as warriors, Admiral Kexmal was saying from the speaker's platform. But warfare and governance are different skills. Should we entrust galactic security to a species we barely understand? Thexval shifted in his observation seat, remembering the months of preparation that had led to this moment. His final report on human military capabilities had sent shockwaves through every government in the Confederation. The species that everyone had dismissed as primitive had revealed themselves to be the most effective military force the galaxy had ever seen. But that was only part of the story. If I may address the assembly, a familiar voice said from the floor. Commander Hyun-woo stepped forward. No longer wearing the simple uniform Thexval remembered from their first meeting. Now he wore the formal dress of a full admiral, with decorations from a dozen different species recognizing his service in the war. Beside him stood So Young, now bearing the title of Strategic Advisor to the Confederation Council. Honored representatives, Hyun-woo began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast hall. We appreciate the confidence you have shown in human military capabilities, but we must be clear about our intentions going forward. A murmur ran through the assembly. Everyone knew that humans could demand almost anything after their role in ending the war. Territory, resources, positions of power. The galaxy owed them debts that could never be fully repaid. "We do not seek to rule," Hyunwoo continued. "We do not want your territories or your resources. We ask only for the opportunity to serve as guardians of peace." "Guardians?" General Korthvan asked from his elevated position. The Velnari leader looked older than when Thexvol had first met him, aged by the weight of a war that had nearly destroyed his species. "What does that mean exactly?" So Young stepped forward. "It means we will help protect those who cannot protect themselves. We will respond to threats against civilian populations. We will maintain the peace that all our sacrifices have purchased." "And in return?" demanded Senator Vexpol, a Carthan politician known for his suspicious nature. "In return, we ask for the resources needed to do the job properly," Hyunwoo replied. "Ships, bases, authority to act when lives are threatened. Nothing more." The debate that followed was intense. Representatives from dozens of species voiced concerns about giving such authority to any single race, especially one that had proven so devastatingly effective in combat. Others argued that human protection had saved their worlds and their peoples. Thexvol listened to the arguments while remembering what he had witnessed during the final months of the war. After the Battle of Velnari Prime, human forces had spread across the galaxy not as conquerors but as protectors. They had helped rebuild destroyed worlds, protected refugee convoys, and hunted down the remaining Krillian raiders who threatened civilian shipping. Most remarkably, they had begun sharing their military knowledge with other species. Human advisors worked with alien forces to improve their combat effectiveness. Human engineers helped upgrade defensive systems on vulnerable worlds. Human diplomats facilitated peace negotiations between species that had been enemies for generations. "They are not seeking domination," Thexvol had written in his final report. "They are seeking purpose. Humans appear to need something to protect in order to function at their best. Give them that purpose, and they become the most valuable allies imaginable." The assembly's attention turned to a new speaker. Insu stepped to the podium, wearing the simple robes of a scientist rather than military uniform. He had been introduced as the Chief of Human Technological Development, the man responsible for the advanced systems that had remained hidden throughout the war. "Honored representatives," Insu began, "there has been much discussion about human military capabilities, but perhaps it is time to discuss our other contributions to galactic civilization." He activated a holographic display that filled the air above the assembly floor. Technical specifications flowed past too quickly for most observers to follow, but the implications were clear. Humans had not just been hiding military technology, they had been concealing advances in medicine, engineering, agriculture, and energy production that could benefit every species in the galaxy. "We offer to share all of this freely," Insu announced. "No patents, no licensing fees, no restrictions. Our only condition is that these technologies be used to improve life for all sentient beings." The silence that followed was profound. Never, in galactic history, had one species offered to share such valuable knowledge without demanding something in return. "Why?" Senator Vexpol asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because that is who we are," replied a new voice from the human delegation. Thexvol recognized Nayung, the human philosopher who had spent the war years studying galactic cultures and belief systems. She had the reputation of understanding alien psychology better than most aliens understood themselves. "Humans evolved as pack hunters and tribal protectors," Nayung explained. "We are strongest when we work together, when we have others to care for and defend. Individual glory means nothing to us. Collective survival means everything." "But you could rule the galaxy," General Korthvan pointed out. "Your military superiority is absolute. Why choose service over dominance?" "Because dominance requires control, and control requires force, and force creates enemies," Nayung replied. "We have seen what happens when species try to rule through fear. The Krillians showed us that path. We choose a different way." The final speaker from the human delegation was someone Thexvol had not expected to see. Jae Sung wore the simple uniform of a peace officer, but his presence commanded attention from every being in the hall. During the war, he had led rescue operations that saved thousands of civilians from dozens of different species. "I volunteer to serve as the first human peacekeeper," Jae-sung announced, "not to enforce human will, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves, to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them." "What authority would such a position carry?" asked a representative from the Outer Rim territories. "The authority to act when others cannot or will not," Jae-sung replied. "To cross borders in pursuit of those who threaten civilians, to use whatever force is necessary to stop genocide, slavery, or other crimes against sentient life." The debate continued for hours, but Thexval could sense the mood of the assembly shifting. Fear of human power was being replaced by recognition of human purpose. These were not conquerors seeking to build an empire. They were guardians seeking to serve a cause larger than themselves. When the vote finally came, it was overwhelming. Humans would be granted authority to maintain galactic peace, with bases and resources provided by the member species of the Confederation. In return, they would share their technology freely and respond to threats against any civilized world. The assembly dispersed. Thexval found himself walking beside Commander Hyunwoo toward the exit. "You have achieved everything you could have asked for," Thexval observed. "The galaxy trusts you with its security. Why do you not seem more pleased?" Hyunwoo stopped and looked back at the Great Hall where representatives were still discussing the implications of the vote. "Because now the real work begins. Winning a war is simple compared to maintaining a peace. We will face challenges that cannot be solved with weapons or tactics." "Such as?" "Species that fear our power despite our intentions. Politicians who want to use human forces for their own purposes. The temptation to solve problems through force when diplomacy might work better." Hyunwoo's expression grew thoughtful. "Power corrupts, even when held by those with good intentions. We must guard against becoming what we fought to defeat." So Young joined them, carrying a data pad filled with requests for human assistance from across the galaxy. 17 worlds requesting aid with reconstruction, 23 asking for protection from remaining Krillian raiders, 47 wanting access to our medical technologies. "And we will help them all," Hyunwoo said firmly. "That is what we do." As they walked toward the transport bays, Thexval reflected on everything he had witnessed over the past year. He had watched a species transform from dismissed primitives to galactic guardians. He had seen them win impossible battles and then use their victory to serve others rather than themselves. "What happens next?" he asked. "We build something better," Na Young replied, looking out at the stars visible through the station's transparent walls. "A galaxy where strength serves justice instead of ambition, where power protects the innocent instead of exploiting them, where species work together instead of fighting for dominance." "You think humans can create such a galaxy?" "Not humans alone," Hyunwoo said.